Hey everyone, Nathan here, Absurd Being. Okay, video 9. So this is the halfway point, but we're definitely not halfway through the book, and we're definitely not halfway through these the minutes, the viewing time worth of this video series. The second half is going to be much more intensive than this one. Anyway. So this is a small chapter, the synthesis of one's own body, and I'll just go through it. I think I'm just going to leave this as one video, even though it's going to be much shorter than the others, but just for the sake of consistency, I think. Okay, let's get into it. Spatiality first. So Merleau-Ponty talks about the way that the spatiality of things and their being are not two different problems. So the last video we looked a lot at the body schema and the way that it was a more kind of encompassing way of thinking about our bodies. And in general, there's we talked a little bit about this, and we'll talk more about this later. The spatiality itself, and spatiality of things and their being are not two separate problems. In saying this, Merleau-Ponty is saying that we can't think of spatiality as this kind of background neutral container in which things are placed, so that the thing is something separate from spatiality. Spatiality is intrinsic to what the thing is, to the being of the thing. And he doesn't discuss this in a lot of detail yet. Like I said, we'll talk more about this later, but that's the basic idea, that we can't treat space as this objective quantity and things as completely separate and independent of that, and as just kind of placed in this neutral container. The two are more closely intertwined than that. And we kind of got an idea of this in the sense that the bodily space, body schema, that turns out to be central in the idea of the phenomenal field. And remember, the phenomenal field is the way that objects appear for us in the first place. So spatiality is going to play an important role in the way that beings appear for us, in the way that things manifest for us. So what we've uncovered here, and this is the quote, we've uncovered beneath the objective space in which the body eventually finds its place, a primordial spatiality of which objective space is but the envelope, and which merges with the very being of the body. And so, and there, we're talking about this primordial spatiality. This is the spatiality of the body, which grounds everything else, which grounds beings, and which will also ground objective space. And like I said, we'll talk more about that later, but that's where we're headed with that. And this is important to raise here, I think, because the idea of the unity of the body exhibits the same structure. So again, we have this deeper organizing facet beneath the objective surface features of the body. And so that's where science stops at the body as an objective thing, as an in itself. But there's a deeper unity beneath this. In the same way that with space, science stops at this objective Cartesian coordinate style space. But we've seen there's a deeper primordial spatiality connected with the body and with that phenomenal field. So the same thing with the body, the unity of the body. There are a couple of ways that Merleau-Ponty talks about this. using the body, the way we use the body. There's a unity underlying this. And so the parts of our body, the visual, and he says tactile and motor aspects, are not simply coordinated. So they're not, and so this is getting at that idea that we don't use our bodies like kind of a machine made up of smaller parts. So we don't use our bodies working from the parts, the individual pieces, the individual limbs, up to this whole. We start from this whole. That's where we enter into this, through the whole, rather than piecing our bodies together from all of the bits that are made, that it's made up of. So that's what he means when he says the parts of my body are not simply coordinated. It's not something that it's the global awareness and the global the global awareness is the way in which we use our body. We use our bodies as a whole, as a total, rather than as a conglomerate of individual parts. And he emphasizes this by talking about the way that we don't learn how to use our bodies piece by piece, step by step, limb by limb, and then putting it all together so that it all works. That's the exact opposite approach that Merleau-Ponty is taking. And he gives an example of this with the way that a child or a baby or an infant learns to grasp something. It's not approaching the problem the way that a scientist would approach the problem. A disinterested mind figuring out how to manipulate these limbs as if there's something different from it. We don't. I can't read my scroll. We don't learn to move the body. We don't learn to move the body. We learn to navigate in the world. That's the distinction here. So when the child's learning to grasp, it's not figuring out how its body's connected and how it has to operate these limbs. It's figuring out how to grasp something out there. So there's that idea again of that centripetal idea, that intentionality. The intentional arc goes beyond the body. We're surpassing the body. And that's the way we learn how to use our bodies. Yes, we do. The infant would say experiment, figure out that that's not going to work, try something different, and yes, the infant does come to understand its body, but it doesn't understand its body by stopping at the body, by trying to manipulate its hands. It does it through trying to get something, through trying to pick something up, through trying to touch something. And that's where the attention is. That's where the intention is. It's out there in the world of objects. It doesn't stop at the hand or the fingers. And so that's the way we learn to use it. We learn to use the body kind of from within the body. So it's more like a practical or intuitive or instinctive sense that we have. And again, that Sartrean phrase, it fits so nicely here. The body is surpassed. We don't learn to use our body by focusing on the body. We focus on things out there. We focus on other objects, and then we're able to gear our body as a unity, as a unified whole towards these things. And so, like we said again in the last video, we're geared towards the world through our projects, and that's the way that we come to understand and to use our bodies. And you can think about this, like I was thinking about this with in comparison with like a robotic arm, and how immensely difficult it is for engineers to get just a single arm, a single hand, and not connected to anything else, just to get that hand to grasp something. The technical hurdles that have to be overcome are just amazing because we do it so easily, and it highlights the difference between what's happening with a human and with this robotic arm, with a CPU. So the CPU it does operate as a disinterested, disassociated entity trying to control the limb, and that's what makes it difficult, because it has to calculate everything. It has to calculate the angles and the direction and the strength of the grip. All of those things have to come into play, and so just getting it to line up and getting it to close in with the correct shape of its fingers and hand is a huge technical obstacle. But and the reason we're able to do it so effortlessly is because we don't do that. We don't try and control our hand. We don't try and manipulate things into the right position and then calculate distances and move in. That's not where our focus is. Our focus is on the thing we're after, and our body kind of follows along in its wake, in the wake of that intentional arc. So that's the first part, using the body. We've uncovered this unity underneath that, this more gestalt form that underlies that. And the same thing when we think about perceiving the body. We perceive the body not like a thing, for example, a cube, which we would, if we were trying to understand the cube, we would have to look at it from all different perspectives. We have to take in all different sides one by one. In the first place, the body, we don't learn about or perceive our body in this way, because the body's not before me like a cube or a thing. The body is me. So it's always on the horizon of our perceptions. It's always at the edge of our vision. It's never something before us. And also we don't understand our body, like I said, piece by piece. We're not piecing together different perspectives to get a whole. We understand it as a whole through motricity, through the way that we're directed towards things in the world. And so Merleau-Ponty says we have to perceive the unity of the body not like a thing, but like a work of art. And that's to say, as a whole. And he gives the example of a painting. You can't understand a painting by drilling down to see what it's made up of. That is to say, little dots of colour. If you go through that and then try and piece together the painting from those dots, you'll never get anywhere. You might get to something, but you're not going to come to whatever understanding you get in the end. It's going to end up obscuring both what the dots are and what the painting is. You won't have come to a proper understanding. And it could be argued you can't get to an understanding of the painting as a whole through the dots. All you'll see really are conglomerations of dots. You're not going to appreciate the painting as a whole. And this, again, something that we've spoken about before. Perceiving the body as a whole, perceiving a painting as a whole, the expression and the sign, the expression or the sign, cannot be distinguished from the expressed or the sense. So the expression, the way that something is presented or the way that it appears, and the expressed, the meaning behind it, these two things can't be divorced and then brought back together. You can't take and just going beyond this to sensory perception, you can't reduce sensory perception, or you can't reduce perception to signs coming in, sensory data points, and then which then have to be organized into a whole. That's not the way that sensation works, and it's not the way that we can come to a coherent understanding of what sensation and perception are. The expression, the sign and the sense come together. As soon as we get the sign, as soon as we receive that sensory input, there's already meaning in there. It already comes to us filled with a sense. And so that's the way that we have to perceive the unity of the body as well. It's not something we can separate and take these individual signs and then draw a bigger picture. We have to go to the Gestalt form from the beginning. So I've got a kind of a big quote here, which I'll read through, and then we'll break down and look at it in two parts. So basically it's about habit and what we can take away from habit. The quote sounds like this: "Habit does not consist in interpreting the pressure of the cane on the hand like signs of certain positions of the cane, and then these positions as signs of an external object, for the habit relieves us of this very task. The pressures on the hand and the cane are no longer given. The cane is no longer an object that the blind man would perceive. It has become an instrument with which he perceives. It is an appendage of the body, or an extension of the bodily synthesis. Correlatively, the external object is not the geometrical plan or the invariant of a series of perspectives. It is a thing toward which the cane leads us, and whose perspectives, according to perceptual evidentness, are not signs, but rather appearances." So I want to tackle this in two parts. Let's just look at the first half first. So this is dealing with the body, what the body is for us, and how habit works with the body, or how our body operates or understands the world through habit. So habit's not means that if we have a cane and we're tapping it around to feel what's in front of us, we're not getting data which we then have to interpret. That's the whole point of habit. Relieves us of this task. We don't have to take sensory points and then string them together into a whole. That's the point of habit, is that we've become accustomed to the cane in such a way that it doesn't reveal signs anymore. It just reveals the thing. It reveals meaning, sense with the signs. So the pressures on the hand and the cane are no longer given. The cane is not an object. It's an instrument with which he perceives. So he doesn't, the blind man doesn't perceive the cane anymore. He just perceives with the cane, in the same way that we don't perceive our hands when we're using them. We perceive with our hands. Again, Sartre, we surpass them. That's such a great expression for this. So that's the first half. Let's look at the second half. And this deals more with the external object, so the thing that's out there. The external object is not a geometrical plan or an invariant of a series of perspectives. So it's not this, remember that Leibniz had that idea. The thing is the house is a geometrical plan. A view which includes all perspectives, a view from nowhere. It's not that. We're not exhausting all of the perspectives here. We're not trying to find something which can capture all of those perspectives, from which we can deduce all of those perspectives. Nor is the thing kind of a hidden, mysterious essence behind the perspectives, an invariant of a series of perspectives. It's neither of those things. Rather, it's the thing toward which the cane leads us. It's the thing that solicits our attention, that draws our intention. And that's that intentional arc. We're drawn, or we project into the world towards these things. That's what they are. They're not this again, this accumulation of data points. That's not what the thing is. And so we don't get signs, we don't get individual sensory data, we get appearances. And that's that phenomenological term, which means a perception that's already immediately given and already imbued with a sense. So when we understand the object in this way, phenomenologically speaking, we don't see like a representation of something out there. We get an appearance imbued with meaning, full of sense, and immediately presented to us. Okay, so that was, I thought it was worth quoting that whole thing because it's kind of a nice summary of everything that we've talked about so far. A couple of other points to close on. When we've talked about this, we've talked about motor habit, and Merleau-Ponty says there's a nice parallel drawn here. The insights from our analysis of motor habit as an expression of existence rather than the movement of a physical object can also carry over into perceptual habit as an acquisition of a world. So that's rather than the reception of sensory data. So again, the idea here that motor habit is it's not the movement of a physical object, it's the expression of existence. That's a nice way to put that. And it's because we intend through our motor actions, we intend the world around us. We move towards the world. We're projecting into the world. That's what the motor habit does. That's what it allows us to do. It brings us. It's that centripetal force carrying us outwards from our bodies, and we can carry that insight into what we could call the perceptual habit, which is the way that we perceive the world through our senses, the way that we are aware of the world. And this is not just that associationist, materialist idea, we're receiving sensory input, but rather we're acquiring a world. So there's a more holistic kind of, it's a deeper understanding of what perception is. And again, the idea that there's a perceptual habit that carries us beyond our senses, beyond the way that we perceive, into the world around us. So when I perceive with my hands, when I'm grasping things, when I'm touching things, I'm not stopping at my hands. I'm not moving, directing my hands. I'm directing my body, my hands towards something. That's where my attention is. It's all centripetal. It's all outside. I'm surpassing my senses, and it's that way that I'm perceiving. And so that was just something quite nice that I thought I'd mention. And ultimately, the last point, intellectualism misses all of this because it separates the sign and the signification, and then ends up distorting both. So it comes to incorrect conclusions, or incorrect's not the right word, but it draws the wrong inferences from when from this process by which it separates signs and their meanings. Okay, let me call it there. Summary time, right? So first we looked at spatiality, and we've noted that we've uncovered this primordial spatiality, which is related to the being of the thing. So not something separate from things. And we can't treat spatiality as this accidental quality that pertains to things. Then we looked at the unity of the body, and there were two ways we looked at this. The first was practical, the way we use the body, and that's instinctive or as a whole. There's that idea of the gestalt form over the parts, and also the way we perceive this unity, and we perceive it like a work of art, again, as a whole first. And finally, we finished with habit, where the sign and the signification merge in the phenomenon, that in the appearance. And there were two types of habit in the end that we considered: motor first, motor habit, which was that nice expression, the expression of existence, and perceptual habit, which was the acquisition of a world. So hopefully that connects some threads that we've been working through recently, and makes some sense. We've got 2 more videos to go in part 1, and then we'll break into part 2 and 3, and those videos are going to be much longer, unfortunately, fortunately, depending on how you view it, I guess. So yeah, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you shortly.